How are you doing, Tom?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Fine, alhamdulillah.
Okay, today's topic is about Shawwal, and after that we're going to start the schedule or the series then of explanation of hadiths. Yeah.
Inshallah.
Yeah. So what is that? Is it going to be both today or?
Well, let's see how the Sheikh gets on.
Mhm.
But we're gonna if it
Yeah,
starts.
because the topic of Shawwal is not going to be that long. It's only about the fasting 6 days of Shawwal, and then we speak about يعني as the first session of the series of the Adhkar, Hadith of Adhkar.
Inshallah. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Bismillah.
I clicked the wrong button to accept the live stream. I just closed it and it kicked me out. I'm back.
And then we speak about يعني as the first session of the series of the Adhkar, Hadith of Adhkar.
Inshallah.
Okay, Bismillah, we're live.
يلا بسم الله. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام الأتمان الأكملان على محمد رسول الله سيد الأولين والآخرين وإمام الأنبياء والمرسلين والشافع المشفع يوم الدين وعلى آله الطيبين وأزواجه الطاهرات أمهات المؤمنين وصحابته الغر الميامين ومن استنى بسنته واهتدى بهديه إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، حياكم الله أيها الإخوة والأخوات إلى هذا اللقاء المتجدد من لقاءات مدارسة العلم في هذه السويعة التي نجتزئها كل يوم أحد من كل أسبوع لنتذاكر فيها سويا ما جاء عن ربنا عز وجل في كتابه العزيز أو في سنة نبيه الكريم صلى الله عليه وسلم. وحديثنا في هذه العشية وهذه الأمسية هو عن أمرين. الأمر الأول فضل صيام 6 من شوال، والأمر الثاني هو الذي سنسير فيه على مدى أسابيع قادمة، وهو في فضل الذكر، وسنتحدث عن كل حديث ورد فيه الحث على الإتيان بذكر من الأذكار التي ينبغي للمسلم أن يواظب عليها ليرضي ربه ويحمي نفسه وينمي إيمانه ويصون أسرته وما يملك. نعم.
Indeed, all praises are due to Allah, and may the most complete and excellent salutations be showered upon the Prophet Muhammad, the leader of the first and the last, the intercessor whose intercession will be accepted on the day of resurrection, and may those excellent virtues and blessings be showered upon his family, his companions, and his pure wives, and those who follow all of them in guidance to the day of resurrection. To proceed, we welcome you warmly, brothers and sisters, listeners, to this lesson in which we look to have some time out and reflect upon the Book of Allah, the great Book of Allah, and the sublime Sunnah, the example of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. So tonight's lecture, or the content of tonight's lecture, will be around 2 things. The first of those is the virtue of fasting the 6 fasts of the month of Shawwal, which is the Islamic month that follows Ramadan, the Islamic month that we are now in. And the second of those, the things that we will talk about, is a program that by Allah's will continue to be upon for the next few weeks and the next few lessons. And that is a program looking at the narrations of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, that talk about the virtues of dhikr, the virtues of remembering Allah the Most High and performing those acts of remembrance. And we will hasten, and we will try, we'll endeavor to mention the ahadith, the narrations that promote this type of worship, the remembrance of Allah the Most High, so that they can so that the individual can be consistent upon this great act of worship. And by doing so, i.e. being consistent upon them, they can attain the pleasure of Allah the Most High. They can reap the rewards and purify themselves of their sins, and they can also build up their families and help their families for this life and the hereafter.
أولا أهنئ نفسي وإخواني بنعمة الله عز وجل علينا بإتمام شهر رمضان، ونسأل عز وجل أن يكون قد تقبله منا كاملا موفورا.
Ameen. So firstly, to begin with, I give myself and all of you the glad tidings, and I greet you with the fact of the great blessing, and I remind us all of the great blessing that we have finished and completed the month of Ramadan, fasting during it, and I ask Allah the Most High to accept these acts of worship from us.
ثانيا أهنئ نفسي وإخواني جميعا بهذا العيد الذي أسماه النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه فرحة، واستقبله المسلمون منذ الرعيل الأول بالفرح والسرور والبهجة والتبريك والدعاء بقبول الأعمال. نعم.
And just as this, I give the glad tidings for myself, and I greet myself and the rest of the listeners, my brothers, about the fact that we have also had the day of Eid, this celebration of festivities that is met with happiness and has been met with happiness by the Muslims over the passing of generations, and it's been met with happiness, with delight. And in addition to this, it's been met with them seeking the blessings of their Lord and asking him, making supplication to him, that their acts of worship may be accepted.
والأمر الذي ينبغي أن نذكر بعضنا بعضا به هو الاستمرار على الطاعة، لأن الله عز وجل قال لنبيه صلى الله عليه وسلم في كتابه العزيز كما في سورة هود في الآية 12 بعد 100: فاستقم كما أمرت ومن تاب معك. فاستقم كما أمرت ومن تاب معك، أي طيلة حياتك. يبين هذا المعنى قوله عز وجل لنبيه صلى الله عليه وسلم: واعبد ربك حتى يأتيك اليقين، كما في سورة الحجر في الآية 99 منها. قال ربنا عز وجل: فسبح بحمد ربك وكن من الساجدين، أي ديمة. إلى متى؟ قال واعبد ربك حتى يأتيك اليقين، أي الموت. نعم.
And it's important that we note and that we say that following Ramadan, we should endeavor to keep up these good acts of worship and these good habits that we have built over this blessed month, or that we built over this blessed month. And Allah the Most High, He mentions in the chapter of the Quran, which is Surah Al-Hud, the chapter about the Prophet of Allah, Hud alayhi salam, and it's verse number 112, where Allah the Most High says that which means, and have establishment, i.e., be established upon the religion of Allah, you, meaning O Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and those who seek repentance from Allah with you. So have establishment, you, O Muhammad, as you have been ordered, and those who seek repentance from Allah with you, meaning the companions. May Allah be pleased with them. And Allah the Most High, He also says to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, indicating that the worship that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was ordered with is worship that takes place over his entire life. So it's not a worship over a fixed period, rather it's worship over the entire period of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him's life. And he mentions, Allah mentions in Surah Al-Hijr, he mentions that which means, and glorify your Lord, and be from those who prostrate to him, and worship your Lord until certainty, i.e., until death overtakes you. So the establishment and the worship that the Muslim is ordered with is until death overtakes him. It's continuing.
ولا ينبغي للمسلم إذا فرح بما أنعم الله عليه من أداء العبادة أن يتقاعس بعد الفراغ منها، لأن هذا شأن العابثين. ونحن نرى مثلا اليوم الذين يتسابقون ركضا يشتدون في ركضهم حتى يبلغوا نقطة النهاية، ثم يخفون في الركض شيئا فشيئا حتى يتوقفوا. لماذا؟ لأنهم بلغوا النهاية. والذي صام رمضان وختمه لم يبلغ النهاية، بل إن تلك كانت هي البداية، لأن النهاية إنما تكون بالموت. نقطة النهاية هي ساعة الفراق، كما قال الله عز وجل والتفت الساق بالساق وظن أنه الفراق، أي أيقن أنه الفراق، مفارق الدنيا والأهل. هناك تتوقف الأعمال، واعبد ربك حتى يأتيك اليقين. قد قال صلى الله عليه وسلم في الحديث: إذا مات ابن آدم انقطع عمله. ينقطع هنالك عمل الإنسان الذي يقوم به بنفسه فينقطع. إذن ليس من الحكمة ولا من العقل أن يوفق الله عز وجل عبدا لصيام رمضان تاما كاملا ثم ينتكس بعد رمضان ويهجر المساجد والقرآن ويتخلف عن الصلاة الواجبة ويضيع الأوقات فيما لا مصلحة فيه ولا فائدة، فإن هذا من فوات الخير وتضييع العقل وضلالة الطريق والعياذ بالله.
So it's not befitting that once an individual is finished or they've completed acts that Allah the Most High has bestowed upon them, acts that Allah the Most High has blessed them with, that they should then return to being in a state of laxity and return to a state or a prior state of inactivity. And this is, if one were to do this, this is the state of the people who don't have focus and who haven't been truly blessed. Because what they do, their actions, they will diminish bit by bit until they completely stop. And that's because to some extent they have achieved their purpose. They have worshipped or they have done something for that fixed period, and then once that period is off or finished or complete, then they stop doing it. As for those who successfully fast during Ramadan, rather they continue, because their fasting of Ramadan is a springboard. It's a beginning rather than being an end in and of itself. And it's a springboard that they continue to act in obedience to Allah the Most High until they perish, i.e. until they die. And then Allah the Most High says, indicating this, شيخنا والتفت الساق بالساق يعني العلاقة
الساق الذي هو بين الفخذ والقدم إذا أتى، لأن أول ما تسحب الروح من القدم، فإذا سحبت من الساق يتشحط الإنسان وتلتف بعضها على بعض من الألم.
أثابكم الله. And Allah the Most High says that which means, and the leg is wound round the leg. So it means that this is in the state when the soul is being extracted from the body, and it does so in it's in pain or it's having difficulty doing it. وشيخنا هذا الروح يخرج بهذا الصعوبة بسبب المعاصي أم؟
لا كل الناس. نعم، المؤمن تخرج روحه كما تسيل القطرة من فيه السقاء، لكن لا شك أن المعاصي والكفر هي سبب الآلام عند الموت وفي الدنيا وبعد الموت.
أثابكم الله. And then Allah the Most High says, to your Lord that day will be the procession, i.e. you will go to your Lord on that day, the day of resurrection. So the end point is our meeting with our Lord the Most High. And as we've said, Allah the Most High says in the Quran, and worship Allah until death overtakes you. And this is because when the individual dies and their soul is taken from this world, their acts are then cut off. So the opportunity to do acts of obedience to Allah, they are no longer, or that opportunity is no longer there. And the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said that indeed when the son or daughter of Adam, the intent is both, dies or perishes, then their actions are severed, except for, and then he goes on to mention, peace and blessings be upon him, these actions. So when an individual dies, their actions, their good, and the opportunity for them to do good, righteous actions, it's finished. And if we take this all into account, it doesn't make sense that Allah the Most High, he would enable someone to increase in their closeness to him and increase in their worship of him during this blessed month, and then only for them to regress to a previous state. What would make sense is that Allah Azza wa Jal, he enables this as an opportunity for the individual to increase until they die.
والموفقون للصلاح لا يفرحون بأدائهم الطاعات بقدر ما يخافون أن ترد عليهم تلك الأعمال، كما قال الله عز وجل في سورة المؤمنون في الآية 60 منها وال61، قال جل وعلا: والذين يؤتون ما آتوا وقلوبهم وجلة أنهم إلى ربهم راجعون أولئك يسارعون في الخيرات وهم لها سابقون. يقول عز وجل: أولئك والذين يؤتون ما آتوا، يعني من الصدقات ومن الطاعات والعبادات، ولكن مع كل تلك الأعمال الصالحة يخافون أن ترد هذه الأعمال وهم يعلمون أنهم راجعون إلى الله، فيخافون أن يرجعوا إلى الله وقد ذهبت أعمالهم بلا ثواب، ومع ذلك لم يمنعهم ذلك بل سارعوا في المزيد من الخيرات. ولهذا قال سبحانه وتعالى: أولئك يسارعون في الخيرات وهم لها سابقون.
Those people who have been given success and who Allah the Most High grants to have put forward acts of worship, they do not become overly pleased, or they are not taken in by the fact that they have simply committed or completed these acts of worship. Rather, their happiness and joy of having done them is balanced by a fear, and that's a fear that these actions will not be accepted. And this is as Allah the Most High, He says in the chapter, The Believers, verse number 60, He says that which means, and they who give what they give, while their hearts are fearful, because they will be returning to their Lord. And then Allah the Most High goes on to say, it is those who hasten to good deeds and they outstrip others therein. So here we see in the first of these two verses that Allah mentions them, that they put forward righteous actions, whether it be fasting or giving in charity or other acts of worship. But these acts of worship in and of themselves, they do not give them a soundness and a confidence in their heart, because they are fearful that these actions, they may not be accepted by Allah the Most High. However, this fear that they have, it doesn't make them despondent. Rather, it does the opposite, where Allah the Most High says in the following verse, it is those who hasten to good deeds and they outstrip, i.e. meaning they do more than others, or they are very, very quick to do them. They're hasty, not hasty in a negative way, but they put forward these actions with enthusiasm.
وأولئك الذين أخلصوا لله في أعمالهم نجدهم قد وفقهم الله عز وجل وزادهم من فضله، كما قال ربنا عز وجل في سورة محمد في الآية 17: والذين اهتدوا زادهم هدى وآتاهم تقواهم. فهم بهذه الزيادة من الهدى يتشوقون للمزيد من العمل، وبإيتاء الله لهم التقوى تطهر قلوبهم وتزكو نفوسهم، فلا يطمئنون إلا في بحور العبادة، كما أن حيتان البحر لا تطمئن إلا في مياه البحر، فإن أخرجت عنه اضطربت بل ماتت. وهكذا المؤمن الذي تذوق حلاوة الإيمان، فإنه كلما أتى بعبادة دخل في عبادة أخرى، ولا يترك العبادة ولا يغفل عنها. لذلك قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: من صام رمضان وأتبعه بست من شوال كان من صام رمضان ثم أتبعه ستا من شوال كان كصيام الدهر. رواه مسلم وغيره، أي كان كصيام العام كله، ذلك أن صيام رمضان هو ثوابه ثواب 10 أشهر، لأن الحسنة ب10 أمثالها، و6 أيام ثوابها ثواب 60 يوما وهي شهرين، فيكون المجموع أجر صيام سنة كاملة، وهو إنما صام 35 أو 36 يوما. لذلك ينبغي للمسلم أن يبادر لصيام هذه الأيام ال6 من شوال، وهي لا تؤدى إلا في شوال على الصحيح، لأن هذا هو ما يوافق نص الحديث. قال: ثم أتبعه 6 من، ومن للتبعيض، والتبعيض لا يكون إلا من الكل، والكل هنا شهر شوال من ثاني يوم منه حتى منتهاه، ولا يكون خارج شهر شوال. نعم.
So those who are sincere to Allah in their worship, Allah the Most High He increases them from His virtue and from His bounty. As Allah the Most High says in the chapter of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, in the Quran, and those who are guided, Allah increases them in guidance, and He gives them fear in their hearts. He gives them fear. وآتاهم تقواهم. شيخنا وآتاهم تقواهم معناه أنه يعطيهم تقوى.
نعم، تقوى بعد تقوى، فيتقون كل ما يبعدهم عن الله.
أثابكم الله. Yes, and so He increases them in guidance, and He gives them consciousness of Him. So it's like consciousness upon consciousness. They fear that they finish one act of worship, and then Allah the Most High, He grants them with additional acts of worship. And in this verse, Allah the Most High, He says that He increases them in guidance. And the guidance here, it refers to the outward actions. And He gives them consciousness of Him. This is an increasing and a heightened acknowledgement and consciousness of Allah within their hearts. So the believers, they're like the fish in the sea. The fish in the sea, they must live within the water and within the sea. Outside of that environment, they cannot survive, and they cannot survive, let alone flourish. And this is the case with the believer, that they're only content and they're in their element when they're doing righteous actions. And when one righteous action finishes, another begins. For this reason, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, whosoever fasts Ramadan and then follows it up with 6 fasts from the month of Shawwal, it is as though that individual has fasted the period of a year, and reported by Imam Muslim. And a year here has been calculated because the individual has fasted Ramadan, and Ramadan is an entire month. And in the reward of righteous actions, the good deed is measured or is given, is rewarded tenfold. So the individual fasts the month of Ramadan, but they attain the reward for 10 months because it's multiplied. Then they follow this month up by 6 additional fasts. Again, these are multiplied by 10. So these 6 fasts become as though they are 60 days. So here, this is 2 months. So in addition to the 10 months of Ramadan, and these 2 months, it's 12 months, which equals a year. So the believer can attain this amount of reward through fasting only 36 days. So it should be the case that the believers, they should try to fast, and they should hasten to fast these 6 additional days. And it's important to note that these 6 days are not to be fasted outside the month of Shawwal, outside the month. This is because this is how it's explicitly stated in the Hadith, that these 6 must be done within Shawwal. And also, from the grammatical point, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, and then they follow them by 6 from Shawwal, and this from, it indicates that it's a part of Shawwal. So this is what is the strongest opinion, that they must be done within the month.
ومع أن هذه الأيام ال6 هي نافلة ليست فريضة، من شاء فليصمها ومن شاء تركها، إلا أنها لما ضمت إلى رمضان، لما التحقت برمضان بصيام رمضان، نالت فضل الصيام في رمضان، فصار لها الأجر كأجر الصيام الفرضي. ولهذا قال ابن المبارك رحمه الله: قيل صيامها من شوال يلتحق بصيام رمضان في الفضل، فيكون له أجر صيام الدهر فرضا، أي كالذي صام الدهر يعني فرضا واجبا. فإن الفريضة أعلى رتبة وأعظم أجرا من النافلة. ولهذا جاء في الحديث القدسي عند البخاري من حديث أبي هريرة أن الله تبارك وتعالى قال: وما تقرب إلي عبدي بأحب مما افترضته عليه، ولا يزال عبدي يتقرب إلي بالنوافل حتى أحبه. إذن الفرض أعلى رتبة وأعظم أجرا، ومع أن 6 من شوال نافلة، إلا أن الله عز وجل رفع مرتبة أجرها وفضلها إلى مرتبة صيام رمضان، لأنها ملتحقة به، فينبغي للمسلم أن يحرص عليها ويأتي بها. نعم.
مثابكم الله. And we say this while also noting that fasting during this month, i.e. fasting the 6th of Shawwal, this is an optional form of worship. It's not obligatory. Whosoever wishes to fast, they can fast, and whosoever wishes not to or does not fast, then there is no sin upon them. However, the fasting of Shawwal has been connected to the fasting of Ramadan. So as it's been connected to the fasting and the virtues of Ramadan, it takes some of the virtues, or it absorbs some of the virtues of Ramadan. What does that mean? So Ramadan is a fasting that is obligatory. And when the individual fasts Ramadan and then follows it up by these 6 days of fasting, it's as though they have fasted for an entire year, fasting that is obligatory. This is significant because the obligatory fasting is more rewarding and is virtuous over and above the fasting that is optional. And this is as شيخنا كان عبد الله بن المبارك هكذا.
نعم، عبد الله بن المبارك قال هذا: قيل صيامها من شوال يلتحق بصيام رمضان في الفضل، فيكون له أجر صيام الدهر فرضا.
أثابكم الله. And this was the statement of the scholar of Al-Islam, Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak. He said that seeing that it's been connected, the fasting of Shawwal has been connected with Ramadan, the individual will get the reward of fasting a year of obligatory fasting. And the fact that they are rewarded for obligatory fasting is significant, because we see in the Hadith, in the narration reported by Imam al-Bukhari on the authority of Abu Hurairah, where the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said that Allah the Most High said, "And indeed my slave does not draw near to me with anything more beloved to me than those acts of worship that I made obligatory upon them. And they do not continue to draw near to me with the optional forms of worship until I love them." So here we see the obligatory acts of worship, they have excellence and they have virtue over and above the optional forms of worship. So through this, the individual can attain the reward of the whole year of fasting, the obligatory fasting. So given this is the case, it should be the case that the Muslim endeavors and hastens to fast these additional fasts.
والعاقل ينبغي أن لا يقابل الإحسان إلا بالإحسان، فالله قد أنعم عليك وأحسن إليك إذ مكنك من الصيام في رمضان، فاغتنم هذه الأيام والفرص والساعات ومدة الحياة التي أنت فيها لتزيد من رصيد حسناتك. قال الحافظ ابن رجب رحمه الله: فأما مقابلة نعمة التوفيق لصيام شهر رمضان بارتكاب المعاصي بعده فهو من فعل من بدل نعمة الله كفرا، نسأل الله العافية والسلام.
And the person who has wisdom and who has sense, they do not reciprocate goodness with anything other than goodness. So seeing that Allah the Most High has enabled them and He has given them a great deal of good through enabling them to fast during Ramadan, then they reciprocate and they reflect this goodness by fasting the additional fast of Shawwal. And Al-Hafiz Ibn Rajab, he said that for the person to have fasted Ramadan and to reciprocate goodness with evilness is a denial of the virtues and blessings and the favors, the bounties of Allah that He has bestowed upon the slave.
ومن جملة ما يستعين به العبد هو صيام هذه الأيام النافلة 6 أيام، ثم يتبعها بعد ذلك طيلة العام بصيام الاثنين والخميس، لأنهما يومان تعرض فيهما الأعمال على رب العالمين. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عنهما: وأحب أن يعرض عملي وأنا صائم، لأن من عرض عمله ختام يومه يوم صوم قام به فإنه يقبل عمله ويغفر ذنبه، كما هو مقرر عند أهل العلم، لأن المسلم إذا أقبل على الله أقبل الله عليه، كما في الحديث القدسي: فإن جاءني يمشي جئته هرولة، وإن جاءني هرولة جئته سعيا. فينبغي للمسلم أن يغتنم هذه الفرص.
And an additional act of worship, or an additional consistency in worship, is that the slave follows these 6 days of Shawwal up with additional worship. And that is that they fast on the 2 days of the week, the Monday and the Thursday, as regularly as possible. And that's because on these 2 days, the actions are raised, or the actions, meaning the acts of worship, the actions that the slave carries out, they are raised to Allah the Most High. And the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said in this regard, indeed, these are the days in which actions are raised to Allah, and I love that my actions are raised to Allah and I'm in a state of fasting. And the people of knowledge have said that if this is the case, i.e., the individual is in a state of fasting during this period when their actions are raised, it's more likely that their good actions will be accepted and their sinful acts will be forgiven by Allah the Most High. And it's important to note that when the individual takes to Allah or orientates themselves towards Allah, that Allah the Most High will take to them and will orientate towards them. Just as has been said in the Hadith, indeed, if my slave comes to me walking, then I hasten towards him.
وكذلك يجتهد في صيام 3 أيام من كل شهر، أفضلها أن تكون 13 14 15، ولا بأس أن يصومهن متفرقات في سائر أيام الشهر. وقد جاء عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أن المواظبة على هذه الأيام 3 من كل شهر تعدل صيام الدهر، أي صيام سنة. فإذا صام رمضان ثم أتبعه 6 من شوال أعطي أجر صيام سنة فرضا. وإذا صام 3 أيام من كل شهر متتالية أو متفرقة وواظب عليها طيلة العام فإنه يعطى ثواب صيام سنة كاملة نفلا، فيكون قد حاز أجر صيام سنة فرضا وأجر صيام سنة نفلا بعمل يسير قليل. نعم.
So the individual, they should also hasten and work hard and strive to fast each month for 3 days, for at least 3 days. And the best of those days that they can fast are the 13th, 14th and 15th of each month. And the meaning of this is the Islamic month. شيخنا الثالث عشر طبعا رابع عشر
نعم الأشهر القمرية.
الله يبارك فيكم. So these are the lunar months, the Islamic months, and it's permissible if the individual isn't able to do it these 3 days together. It's permissible for them to do them wherever they can within the month, and it's been reported and narrated that to be consistent upon fasting 3 days of the month, it equals the reward of fasting an entire year. So if an individual does this for the whole entire year, i.e. the 3 days each month, then they will get the reward for fasting the whole year. So if we look at this, the individual fasts Ramadan, and then they fast 6 days from Shawwal, they will get the reward of fasting the whole year, a fasting that is obligatory. Then on top of this, they fast for 3 days of each month, all the year, then they will get the reward for fasting the entire year, the reward of the optional fast. So here we have 2 types of worship. For one, you will get the reward of a whole year fasting obligatory fast, and the second, you'll get the reward of a whole year's fasting, the optional fast. So it also contains an indication and encouragement that we should do this.
وينبغي للعبد أن يواظب على الأعمال الصالحة بعد رمضان. قد جاء عن عائشة رضي الله عنها وكانت قد سئلت عن عمل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم، قال السائل: هل كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يخص يوما من الأيام؟ فقالت: لا، كان عمله ديمة، أي منتظما دائما، يصوم الاثنين والخميس ويقوم الليل بقدر ما يستطيع وهكذا، ويصوم من الأيام ما شاء. فالمهم أنه يواظب ويستمر، لا أن يأتي في رمضان ويجتهد ثم بعد رمضان يترك الاجتهاد ويترك العمل، فإن هذا كما قال بشر الحافي رحمه الله، قيل له: إن قوما يتعبدون ويتهجدون في رمضان، أي فقط في رمضان، فقال: بئس القوم قوم لا يعرفون لله حقا إلا في شهر رمضان، إن الصالح الذي يتعبد ويجتهد السنة كلها.
شيخنا هذا الصادق، من هذا كان الصادق؟
هذا بشر الحافي.
نعم، وذكر بئس قوم لا يعبدوا أو لا يعرف.
قال بئس، يعني بئس القوم قوم لا يتعبدون الله، لا يعرفون لله حقا إلا في شهر رمضان، ثم قال: إن الصالح، يعني الرجل الصالح، نعم، الذي يتعبد الله، يتعبد ويجتهد السنة كلها.
أثابكم الله شيخنا. So in a general sense, the Muslim should be consistent in their acts of worship, in all their acts of worship. And the wife of the Prophet, the mother of the believers, Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, she was asked, did the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, did he have any special acts of worship on particular days? To which she replied in the negative. She said no, rather his actions were consistent. So he was consistently on his worship, fasting the Mondays and Thursdays, standing the night in prayer, etc. It wasn't that he would increase in his worship during Ramadan, then when Ramadan was over, he would then decrease or he would go to nothing. Rather, he would be consistent in them. And the early scholar of Al-Islam, Bishr al-Hafi, he mentioned, or he was asked and told about a people who worshipped Allah, i.e. they focused on their worship of Allah in Ramadan and only in Ramadan. And he was asked of his opinion of these people, and he said, what will woe unto the people who only know the rights of their Lord during Ramadan. Rather, the pious and the virtuous, the righteous, are those who worship their Lord throughout the year in its entirety.
وأيضا ينبغي للمسلم أن لا يتوقف عمله عند حد معرفة الثواب، فإذا راق له عمل وإن لم ير لا، لكن العبادة نفسها مقصودة، وهي المقصد الأسمى، وهي في الحقيقة شكر الله عز وجل، كما قال الله عز وجل لآل داود: اعملوا آل داود شكرا وقليل من عبادي الشكور. اعملوا آل داود شكرا وقليل من عبادي الشكور، كما في الآية 13 من سورة سبأ.
And the individual, they should not stop, or they should not restrict their actions till they think they have received this reward. Rather, they should carry on and they should be consistent. And worship, the intent behind worship is not simply to attain the reward. Rather, the worship is meant, or is intent in and of itself, as an act of giving thanks to Allah the Most High. And this is as Allah the Most High says in the chapter of the Quran, in Surah Sabah, act or perform righteous deeds, O family of David, as a means of giving thanks to Allah. And indeed, few of his slaves are from those who give thanks. The verse number 13 from the chapter As-Sab'ah.
نعم. وليتذكر المسلم، ولهذا قال لما قيل وهيب بن الورد أحد السلف، سئل عن ثواب شيء من الأعمال كالطواف، يعني ما ثوابه؟ فقال: لا تسألوا عن ثوابه، ولكن سلوا ما الذي على من وفق لهذا العمل من الشكر. كيف تشكر وقد وفقك الله إلا بمزيد من الطاعة؟ قال: لا تسألوا عن ثوابه، ولكن سلوا ما الذي على من وفق لهذا العمل من الشكر للتوفيق والإعانة عليه. لأن الله عز وجل يقول: ولئن شكرتم ويتأذن ربكم لئن شكرتم لأزيدنكم.
And one of the early scholars of Islam was asked, and it was Wahib ibn Man, Shaykhana, ibn Saleh. Wahib ibn Ward. He was asked about a particular action. What's the reward for this action? What will the slave get if they perform it? And he responded and said, rather, your focus should be on what is upon the person who is given the success to have been able to have completed it, i.e., what's the form of thanks that they must give to Allah the Most High for having been able to successfully complete it. And this is as Allah the Most High says, and when your Lord proclaimed, indeed, if you give thanks, indeed, I will increase you and I will give you more.
وكذلك يقول رب العزة والجلال كما في سورة القصص كما في سورة القصص في الآية 67 منها: فأما من تاب وآمن وعمل عملا صالحا فعسى أولئك أن يكونوا من المفلحين. وقال سبحانه وتعالى في في آية أخرى: وقال في آية أخرى في سورة النحل في الآية 97: قال: من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فلنحيينه حياة طيبة، أي في هذه الدنيا، ولنجزينهم أجرهم بأحسن ما كانوا يعملون، أي في الآخرة.
And Allah the Most High, He is mentioned in the chapter of the Quran in Surah Al-Qasas, the stories. He mentions in verse number 67 that which means, but as for one who had repented, believed, and done righteous deeds, or completed righteous deeds, it is expected, it is promised by Allah that they will be from those who are successful. And Allah the Most High, He also mentioned in the chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Nahl, which is the chapter of the bee. He mentions that, and that this is in verse number 97. He mentions that which means he mentions that which means whoever does righteousness, whether male or female, while they are a believer, we, meaning Allah, will surely cause them to live a good life, and we will surely give them their reward in the hereafter according to the best of that which they used to do.
وختاما نذكر بالأمر الذي كنا قد قدمنا في أول اللقاء، وهو سلسلة الأحاديث عن الذكر، عن كل ذكر معناه، وإن كان له قصة حدث نتطرق لها، وذلك لأن الذكر هو أعظم الأعمال على الإطلاق. أعظم الأعمال على الإطلاق هو ذكر الله عز وجل. قد قال الله عز وجل: فاذكروني أذكركم. وقال سبحانه وتعالى: والذاكرين الله كثيرا والذاكرات أعد لهم جنات، أعد لهم مغفرة منه ورحمة. أو لعلي أستحضر الآية مرة أخرى. قال سبحانه وتعالى: والذاكرين الله كثيرا والذاكرات أعد لهم مغفرة وأجرا عظيما، وأجرا عظيما، كما في الآية 35 من سورة الأحزاب. فإن شاء الله سنشرع في الكلام عن هذه الأذكار، وظائفها، فوائدها، وإن كان هناك قصة أيضا نسلط الضوء عليها بإذن الله تعالى، وذلك من لقائنا القادم، والذي سنتناول فيه الحديث عن آية الكرسي، تلك الآية العظيمة والذكر العظيم. والله أعلم، وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه.
أثابكم الله شيخنا. Allah يبارك فيكم, mashallah. And finally, I'll remind you of the second matter that we said that we would start with today, and that is the series of narrations that talk about the different forms of active remembrance, and the fact that we will look to them and we'll explain them. We'll explain them by Allah's will in depth. If there is an accompanying story, we'll look at the story and the narration, and we'll take the points of benefit from it. And this is because this act of worship, remembering Allah the Most High, is one of the greatest acts of worship the individual can put forward. And Allah the Most High says that which means, remember me and I will remember you. And he said also that which means describing the believing men and the believing women, those who remember Allah much, he has prepared, meaning Allah has prepared for them forgiveness and a great reward. So by the will of Allah, next lesson we'll begin with these acts of remembrance of Allah the Most High, explaining the manners in which to do so, explaining how to say them, explaining the benefits of saying them. And we'll begin next week with the Ayat al-Kursi, the verse of the footstool, which is the greatest verse in the Quran. And this is what I have to put forward, and may Allah the Most High send peace and blessings and salutations upon our Prophet Muhammad and upon his family and companions to the day of resurrection. أثابكم الله شيخنا بهذه المحاضرة
آمين
القيمة.
وإياكم، جزاكم الله خير، وجزا الله الأخ عبد الحكيم ولسم خير، ووفق الجميع لما يحب ويرضى. ونشكر الأستاذ توم على الترجمة لإخواننا الصم.
So our Sheikh signed off by thanking all of us, thanking Abdul Hakim Wilson and also our teacher Tom for the excellent translation that he's giving, and he gave thanks to me as well. Allah yubarik fikum Sheikhana, thabakum Allah.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Jazakallah khair, Tom and Akil. Jazakallah khair. Again, just repeating what the Sheikh says, inshallah, from next week, we will be doing Ayat al-Kursi and explaining the hadiths, the story behind the hadiths and the benefit of the hadiths, inshallah, in regards to protection from your evil eye, protection of wealth, protection from harm. Things like this, it's important to know the stories behind them to help us remember them and to reflect on them, inshallah. So that will start next week, Sunday, inshallah, from 7 to 8. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
عليكم السلام ورحمة